So microphone's not quite working as we had planned tonight, so we're going to do our best to project our voices after speaking softly to your children in our offices for many years. We're going to do our best to project to you all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Humphrey. I am the Director of Counseling here at John Bapst, and also presenting with me tonight is Michelle Walsh, who has the first half of the alphabet, students A through K. I have students last names L through Z. And what we're hoping to do tonight is go through the application process with all of you. It tends to change very subtly every year, but we've already been in all of the senior English classes at this point, kind of gone over the process with your sons and daughters a little bit. And also, we're getting ready to schedule what we call our senior conferences, where we meet with them individually for usually a full class period. It can be longer than that if need be, and that's certainly not the limit to when you can see us. You can certainly contact us if you have any questions as we go along. We have some handouts at the back that I'm just going to tell you what we have. We have if you'd like to take notes as we present tonight, we have a PowerPoint with spaces where you can take some notes back there. We have many college pamphlets that college representatives sent us and give to us. Certainly, a lot of that information is online right now, but feel free to take what is there, because whatever is there with a specific college or university, if we end up with it, we probably will just throw it out eventually because it becomes obsolete in a matter of months. We also have a couple things pertaining to financial aid up there. We're not going to delve into that too much tonight. We have our financial aid night coming up on Monday the 30th, same time as we have tonight, 6:30. Although we're going to call in somebody from the Finance Authority of Maine who knows this inside and out and can answer any questions you may have. So again, please feel free to take whatever information you see back there. I even have, I kind of cleaned out my closet a little bit today, but they'll sometimes give us swag. They'll give us lanyards. They'll give us water bottles. Sometimes they'll even give you blankets and t-shirts, things like that. So I have a couple of things up there. Feel free to take those if you'd like as well. Aside from that, thank you for coming tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Walsh, who's going to do the first part of the presentation. And then I will do the second part, and then we'll be available to answer some questions at the end. So I'll turn it over now to Mrs. Walsh.
All right. Well, hello there. Thank you for coming again. Just out of curiosity, how many of you, this is the first time you're going through the college application process with your student? Just curious what our audience is like. Okay. All right. Well, just so you know, I'm living proof that you can get through this process twice. I have two kids that are 21 and 19. They're both just up the road at the University of Maine. The first time I went through the process, I was a pre-K to 8 counselor, so I had no idea about this process, and it's changed significantly since I was that age. And by the way, please help yourself to chairs if you're walking in and you feel more comfortable to kind of sit in the back row. And the mystery was all solved for me once I started working here and I had child number 2 go through the process. And when you know the behind the scenes stuff, it's so much less anxiety inducing. But please know we're not just here for your students, we're here for you too. We know you're encouraging them to be independent and responsible. But when you've asked them, 3 or 4 times if they can get this piece of information for you and they still haven't gotten it, don't be afraid to email or call. We're both parents, we understand. So we just want to be as supportive as we can for you. How's my voice level right now? Anybody in the back having trouble? A little bit higher? Just give me the nonverbal thumbs up. I'll think it's encouraging and hey, talk louder. So certainly, as Mr. Humphrey said, this process is kind of a lengthy one. We started in the spring with junior conferences with your students. You should have received an email with a copy of notes with that information. I've found myself reminding students a few times this fall that there was lots of good information in those notes and they're still worth referencing. So digging those out might not be a bad idea. As Mr. Humphrey also said, we did classroom presentations with your students. We gave them some nice handouts. We also emailed those out so that you should have copies. And now we'll begin our senior meetings with them so that they can have a chance to sit with us one-on-one and ask questions as they're specific to their college interests. The first thing I would say is the most helpful suggestion that I can give you is to help your student get organized. So buying some sort of hard case container that holds the hanging file folders or one of those expandable files, that's going to be your best friend through this process, because if you and your student can both commit to knowing that that's where you're going to keep all things college application related, that will be really helpful as you go along the way and you need pieces of information. I won't read the whole slide, but obviously you want to have a folder for each college that your child might be applying to, testing information, all the multitude of logins and passwords that come with all aspects of this whole process. And we did give you a slide of information on this handout that kind of gives some of the basic information, like the school address, phone number, counselor names, and emails. But perhaps the one piece that you aren't familiar with is that 6-digit code called the CEEB and ACT code. That's something that oftentimes when you're searching for John Bapst, when you're on an online application, if you enter that 6-digit code, it's going to pop up automatically for you. So remember that you saw that on here, and that piece of information is here for you. We also shared a list on the slide of many different websites that are helpful. johnbapst.org, the College Board, FAFSA, Common App, Naviance. Probably the Common App is the one that most of your students had possibly their first exposure to during our classroom visits. We encourage students to make a Common App account and basically type in the college search box the colleges that they're thinking of applying to. The Common App is one common application that you can fill out, and it's accepted at over 800 colleges. So chances are a good number of your students, potential colleges, will accept that application. Not all do. I will talk about that a little bit more in detail later, but that's a good website to become familiar with. So again, a username and password that they would have had to put in, and they want to save and keep that somewhere so they can access that again. Naviance is another tool. Hopefully you kind of remember getting an access code for that back when your children were freshmen or their first year here. That is a college search and career exploration tool that they have access to. Senior year, it kind of kicks into high gear because we utilize Naviance. There's a way that we can match it to a student's Common App or to their applications and send their transcripts and teacher letter of recommendations, counselor letter of recommendations, etc., all electronically to the colleges that they apply to. So Naviance is another one. Make sure you have their password, have them write it down for you, seek out your password that you would have received, or give one of us a call or an email and just ask us for that again. Let's see. So we're going to talk about testing, and part of the reason for that is every school has different policies in regards to testing. Some colleges absolutely want to see either an SAT score or an ACT score. More and more nowadays, some colleges are going what they call test optional, which is a really tough call. We have a lot of students come in saying, okay, they say they're test optional. Should I send it or shouldn't I? And so the question is always, do you feel like this score is a good representation of you? Do you feel confident with this score? A lot of times that means doing a little bit of research for the particular college that it is, and kind of looking to see what their average range of scores is. And I would say absolutely, if it's in the average range of score or above, if it's test optional, share that test score. If your score is below and it's optional, I wouldn't share that. Let them base their admissions decisions on, your other application components. Some schools will also give students the opportunity to self-report their scores. And that's basically what that involves is students can input their scores from their knowledge on the application, and if they enroll at that school, then they'd have to follow up with an official score report from the organization. The reason we talk about testing right off the first thing is because there are 2 test dates remaining for this fall, that for the SAT anyway, that would allow students to have their scores back for most of the application deadlines. October 5th is the next SAT test date, and right now that's running under late registration. So if your student has not already registered for that test date for the SAT and they want to, they still can through the 24th of September, but it's going to cost you about $30 more than it would have. There is a November 2nd SAT test date. Regular registration deadline is October 3rd. Late registration deadline is October 22nd. That test date, the only thing we say about the November test date is that if you have a student that wanted to apply perhaps under an early action or early decision application deadline, they might not have their scores back. And again, every school has different policies about whether the deadline is the deadline for all materials or if it's for the student's application, and then supplemental materials can come a little bit later. So those are often questions for the college if you're unclear. Let's see, subject tests. So this was something that we talked about with your students back in the spring for their junior conferences. Hi, Colby. In their junior conference time, we told them that subject tests are not necessarily something that you're going to be looking at for every school. Some schools will recommend them. They're 1-hour tests on a particular subject area, and those tests are offered on the same dates that the SAT test dates are. The subjects that are offered do vary, and all of that information is found on the College Board website. So by now, you might want to take a look, sit down with your student, and just look at their list of colleges and just look at their test requirements and see if any recommend a subject test. If they do, you probably want to have your child register for that November 2nd test date and kind of plan on applying under a regular decision deadline. And Mr. Humphrey's going to get a little bit more into the different types of application deadlines a little bit later in the presentation. The ACT. The ACT is another nationally recognized standardized test, just like the SAT. Most colleges will accept either. Some students might like to prefer the ACT because it's a little bit different style. Other students just take the SAT and don't give it a thought for the ACT. I think it's kind of a regional thing too. I think most Northeastern high school students kind of tend to go the SAT route. But just know that that's another option. One of the things we tell students in the spring is that it does have a science section on it. So if you're a student that has a particular interest in science or that's a strength for you, it may be worth giving that test a try just to see how that helps boost your score a bit. The ACT, the next test date for that is October 26th. With a regular registration deadline of September 20th. Okay. I'm looking around to see if we've got any of our international students in here. I don't see any, but I'll say this piece just in case. International students usually have to provide a TOEFL score as part of their application. So that's something that you want to be sure you're thinking about as you go through the college application process. Registration deadlines are firm for testing, so you need to know that if you don't register by that certain date, you will be paying that extra $30 for the test. A way to save a little bit of money in this process when it comes to testing. Colleges, when they do want standardized test scores, they want official score reports from the testing agency. So in other words, they don't accept Mr. Humphrey or I saying, oh, this student got this score on that test. They want an actual either electronic or printed submission from the College Board if it's the SAT, or the Educational Testing Service if it's the ACT or the TOEFL. So basically, you want to make sure that you're planning for that. When your student registers to take a test, They can have access to 4 free score reports, meaning you can choose 4 schools or universities, colleges or universities, to send your scores to for free. We encourage you strongly to do that and take advantage of that. After the 4 free test reports, they cost $12 a piece. So let's say you're applying to 6 schools, that adds up pretty fast, and that's not counting your application fees. Please be aware that you have different deadlines for how late you can take advantage of those 4 free score reports. So for the SAT, you have up to 5 days after you take the test in order to go onto your College Board account and request where you'd like those to be sent. I think it's 9 days oh, maybe I'm confusing that one, but I think it's 9 days for the ACT. But 5 days for the SAT. So let's just say 5. We'll go with 5. It's like when you tell your grandmother that dinner's at 12 and it's really at 12:30. That way maybe she'll be on time. All right. Yes. That's okay. It just means that you're going to have to pay for whatever. So the question was, what if your child doesn't take a test a second time coming up? So basically, they have that test score already. You would want to ask them, did they indicate up to 4 free school reports that they could get that day? I know that Mrs. Morgan, when she's having them fill out the pre-registration paperwork, encourages them to do that. If they did not, then you're going to have to go on to their College Board account with them and have them select which schools they want to receive that report, and that will be $12 for each school. Okay. Another good follow-up question to that someone might be wondering is, if I took the test in the spring and now I take it again in October, do those test scores, if I shared them in the spring, do the fall test scores automatically go? And the answer is no. So use the free score reports at least, and pay for the additional ones beyond that. Any other questions about testing? Yes. Okay, so the question was, the previous score was better. Maybe your child has taken the test twice already. You want to look to your school's website to see what their policy is on testing. Some schools do what they call super scoring, where they'll look at multiple test dates, take the highest reading and the highest math, and combine that for what's called the super score. A lot of schools have a policy also where they want to see every test that your child has taken. So again, you can usually find that under the admission requirements tab for each college website. They'll talk in detail about what they require. Also on the Common App, when you click on the school, for those of you students that have added schools to your Common App already, if you click on the school, right on that basic information page that pops up, it will tell you their testing requirement and what their policy is. So that's a good resource as well. Any other questions about testing? Yes? The 5 days, the question, the 5 weeks. Oh, it could take up for 5 weeks. So this is what students don't understand when I tell them in conferences and meetings. You can take up to 5 weeks for your scores to get there. And they look at me like they're in the digital technology age, right? And they're thinking, isn't everything just like this? And I kind of wonder that too. But I think it has more to do with the mass numbers of test scores that these agencies are sending out. When you think about how many kids are taking these tests every year and sending them, that they want to be safe rather than sorry, and give you that time. So it might not take that long. It could take shorter, it could take longer. So that's one of the reasons why you want to request those test scores be sent as soon as you can. 5 weeks from the test date. Yes, yeah. Okay. Yes. The 5 weeks is at the test center. Let's say the College Board, if it's the SAT, it would be from the date your student took the test and they request the test be sent. Maybe it's that day, right? Maybe they wait and request it Maybe they take the test on October 5th coming up, but they decide they wait until November 10th to request that their scores be sent. So in that case, it would be 5 weeks from the date that they requested it to be sent. Yes. So that's another reason why we really recommend in most cases to send that score right from the start. Arrange automatically when you register for the test to go ahead and have your scores sent to those schools that you're interested in. If you send the scores to a school and let's say your child has second thoughts after they've already shared those scores, I'm not going to apply there, they just hold on to it for a period of time, and when they don't receive other supporting documents for an application, they'll just discard it after the application season is over. So there's no harm in that, other than potentially your lost $12. So.
I'll just chime in real quick. There is an option with College Board to rush your scores for an additional fee, but it's not like overnight. It's like maybe 2 or 3 weeks instead of 5. So again, it's good to plan ahead.
All right. So we're just going to move on here to financial aid, and again, we're just going to touch somewhat briefly on it because that will be the focus of our financial aid night on September 30th here in the auditorium. It's a Monday this time at 6:30. Basically, the main part of the presentation that night will be on the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This is an application that your student will have to complete every year that they're in school. So what I really recommend strongly is that you don't sit and take care of it for them because they're going to need to know how to do it. So sorry guys, I'm blowing your fun time of having that taken care of, but it's really not a horrible process as long as you have the required information. Finance Authority of Maine, our presenter that night, that's what they do all day long, is help students with questions on how to file the FAFSA. They're a wonderful resource for us, and they truly are the experts. So please come that night and hear their presentation, and don't hesitate to reach out to them with questions that you might have. You can certainly ask us as well, and if we don't know the answer, we're going to refer you to them because that is, like we said, that's all that they do. The FAFSA, when you file the FAFSA, you cannot file it until October 1st. So I've run into a few situations with some students where they know it's coming, and so they've tried to get a head start on things, which is awesome. But the problem is if you've already tried to do that, it's acting like you're a freshman in college right now, which is not what you want, okay? So do not go on and try to complete the FAFSA until October 1st. I will encourage you to do it as close to October 1st as you can, because what happens is the federal government has their, lump sum of money, and every day from October 1st on, as people submit those FAFSAs, they're starting to dole that money out. So if you wait, say, until January or February, if your student qualifies for aid, they may still get some, but it might be a smaller percentage than what they could have gotten if they had filed right off in October. I literally set a reminder on my phone to remind myself to get, wrangle my 2 kids to get there and do their FAFSAs on October 1st, because it's just, I want it done. I don't like doing it. It's not scary, it's just a pain. But that's what I would recommend. Some students might find that some schools require an additional financial aid form called the CSS profile. It's not as common, and one of the things that we can take a look at with your students during their senior meeting is whether or not they have any schools on their list that will require that CSS profile. But the next easiest way to tell is just when you're looking at the financial aid page of the website of a school, it will tell you if that's something that they require. So if you see that strange word, CSS profile, know that you're in for a little extra fun beyond the FAFSA. I did just the FAFSA with my first child, and my second child applied to a school that required the CSS profile. The FAFSA was something I was able to do, given our family situation, in one sitting. The CSS profile asked for some information that was a little more in depth, so just be aware that it might not be a one-shot deal. I ended up having to call, what do I have in my retirement? I'm not sure. Things that I should know anyway that I didn't. So just be aware of that piece, that it might take you a little bit of extra time and digging and some phone calls. The FAFSA is free to file. It doesn't cost you any money at all. or to share your FAFSA results with schools that you're applying to. The CSS profile does charge money. It's run through the College Board. I'll just zip my lip there. It's a $25 registration fee, and then for every school that you send your results of the CSS to, it's an additional $16. So it can add up. Luckily, there aren't that many schools that require it. Basically, the difference between the two, the FAFSA is assessing your students' eligibility for federal aid. The CSS profile is assessing their eligibility for private non-federal aid. That's kind of the main difference, and why in those cases you have to fill out both. All right, scholarships. I know students are thinking, Mrs. Walsh, don't talk about that right now. I just have to deal with my applications. Scholarships, when we met with your students for junior conferences, we showed them on Naviance where there's a scholarship list that gets updated as scholarships come in. That's mostly scholarships that Mr. Umphrey or I might receive in the mail or via email. We make sure they're updated on that list. Beyond that, there are numerous free college scholarship search sites that you can use. Some of the ones that I talk about with my students are FastWeb. One that's kind of gaining popularity a little bit is Going Merry. It's a kind of a goofy name, but they're kind of calling themselves the Common App of scholarships, meaning you fill out one common application and then you can submit that to multiple scholarships. A few students that I know that have used it kind of like it because they feel like it's less work for them, which means they're willing to apply for more scholarships. So definitely check that part out.
What's that called again?
Going Merry, M-E-R-R-Y. The College Board also has a scholarship search service. If you just Google College Board scholarship search, I think I said FastWeb already. And also the College Board has a new program called Opportunity Scholarships. We tried to get students aware of that in the spring. For every step of the college application process, as long as they sign up, for each different step that they complete on this process that they'll already be going along, if they qualify, they are randomly entered into a drawing to win scholarships of up to, I think, $4,000 is the top one, but it might be 500 or 1,000 or 2,000. So definitely check that out as well. That's College Board Opportunity Scholarships. Yes? Going Merry. Going Merry. Yep. Like Merry Christmas, yes. A College Board Opportunity Scholarship. Yep, check that out. And then the College Board Scholarship Search. If you just Google free college scholarship searches, you're gonna come up with a lot. Just do not pay. There are a lot of companies out there that have learned to prey upon the fears of students and parents that are worried about paying for college, that they might say these things like, pay $50 and we guarantee you access to thousands of dollars of scholarships. They're giving you access to all the ones that are available on the free sites, and you're not out $50. So just make sure you're using a free scholarship search site. One other resource for the scholarships is to check the websites of the schools that you're looking at. Usually it's under financial aid or scholarships. Be very careful when you're reading those because you want to pay special attention. Some scholarships you're considered for simply by submitting your application. Others have separate application processes that you have to follow. So make sure you're paying attention to that piece when you're looking at those. You don't want to lose out if you had to submit an application for that. Let's see. Creating a college list. Your students were hopefully working. I'm smiling and making eye contact, and none of them are looking at me. They're on their phones. They hopefully have somewhat of a college list at this point. That was their kind of summer job beyond everything else they might have going on. We really encourage them to have a good variety of schools on their list. Not that they had to have, high numbers of schools, but make sure that if you have a school on there that's like a safety school, given your test scores and your GPA, but also a financial safety school, right? Because I know when you start looking at the price tags, it's terrifying. Make sure you've got good match schools on your list. Mr. Umphrey's going to talk about that a little bit more. You just want to have a nice number of schools so that you know, okay, I might get some rejections, but I feel pretty certain I'm going to have some acceptances. Basically, we're encouraging students to continue working on those lists. We don't expect them to be absolutely finalized, but they should have a good start. When you come for your senior meetings, guys, that's what we're going to be talking about, is what colleges are on your list, and kind of going from there. So when you get that email from Mr. Humphrey or I that says you're invited on this date and time, do what it takes to come to that meeting with at least a couple schools on your list so that we have something to talk about, okay? If you have questions, you know where to find us. Another thing that I'll mention, we showed them during classroom visits this past week how to see what college representatives are coming to visit us here at John Bapst. So through Naviance, colleges can sign up. They can send a representative to come during, sometimes hopefully during a study hall, other times not always, and they meet in the counseling office, and your student can look at that list of reps that are visiting on Naviance. If it's a college they want to hear more about, they can just click sign for more info, I think it says, and it allows them to sign up right through Naviance. Then all that happens is that day they get called to the office to pick up their pass, and they go. Teachers must approve their absence if it's from a class. If they can't come, if a teacher says no, your student just needs to let us know, and we're happy to get copies of any materials that the representative leaves. But that's a good opportunity to not have to go anywhere outside the building and still get college information. Let's see. So college visits. So when you're thinking about going to see some of these colleges, always, like, again, look at the list of schools your child is thinking about and just type in, like, UMaine open house, fall open house. Lots of colleges have specific open house programs. Those can be good days to visit a campus because they're very organized, and they usually have all of the different departments set up that you might want to visit or hear from. That does not mean you're confined to those dates, though. Know that you can certainly call up a college admissions office, let them know when you're going to be in the area, what date you're looking at setting up a tour, and they have students that will take you on a tour and kind of answer questions that you may have. Terrifying for your student, though, is that the idea of sitting with an admissions representative for an interview. We encourage your students to do that, and what we try to tell them is, you're interviewing that college every bit as much as they're interviewing you. Is this place a good fit for me? What questions do I have for them? And when you look at it from that frame, it's a lot more comfortable. We do want to point out that there is a 5-day stretch in October. Monday the 14th is Indigenous Peoples Day. So you've got that Saturday, Sunday, Monday, no school, and then no school for seniors on the 15th and 16th of October because the underclassmen are doing Ethics Day. So unless your senior is volunteering to help with that group, with the freshmen, they're going to be free. So you can make good use of that stretch to be able to maybe visit some colleges that you didn't get a chance to visit this summer. When you're there on campus, you know, if it's not a formal open house opportunity, make sure you check everything out. Eat a meal in the dining commons, see a room in the dorm, pay attention to the student center of the campus and look at the bulletin boards and look at the different flyers that are up there. See what the activities are that are coming up, and just get a sense of what's available at that campus for you. We do have a list of questions also in the counseling office that if you're going to go and have an interview or meet with somebody, we have kind of a list of typical common questions that somebody might ask you. So let us know if you want that. Any questions up to this point before I turn this over to Mr. Humphrey? Okay, very good. Changing of the guard.
So before I get to the next slide, a couple of other events coming up that I don't think are in your materials. So on November 15th, we are having a decision day here for Husson University. And what a decision day is they send admissions representatives here. They meet with students here for about, in one-on-one for about 15, 20 minutes each. And by that point, they might have submitted their application like a week before, but then that day they get an actual decision from that school. So we're having a decision day for, oh, and the good part too, they do waive the application fee. So it saves you about $40 for Husson, and then we have another one for the University of New England on November 20th. So both opportunities are available. We get the question often, why don't we include UMaine in this? Well, UMaine actually has a free application fee, I believe, for all Maine residents, yeah. So, and actually, the other thing I'll say about that, for the University of Maine, right on their website, they tell you what merit scholarships you can expect based on GPA and your SAT or ACT scores. So if you apply by December 1st, you're gonna get that scholarship. So we always try to encourage people to apply by December 1st. So that segues into the next slide.
And could you just announce, I'm realizing I forgot to mention the NIACAT college
Yes.
fairs. Thank you.
So yeah, there is also a
I have one question.
Sure.
I sort of cite, but the question I had to myself was, if we apply
mhm,
before December 1st,
yeah.
and they accept, they send us an acceptance, but we choose not to go there, like,
Yeah.
is the scholarship based on you accepting, or,
They offer it to you up front,
okay.
but if you go to another school,
You
it's
don't
no
get,
longer
yeah.
yours.
That'd be a bonus.
Yeah, well, you see in the press, like there was somebody, I think last year, this caught my eye, somebody got accepted to about 60 colleges. 60, yes, and had hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships. They made a big deal out of it, but they still have to choose one college to go to. And they don't get to bring all that money with them. That's contingent upon where they go. But yes, in regard to the college fair, that's going to be on September 23rd at the University of Maine. Out back on the table, there is a list of colleges that will be in attendance. It is mainly colleges from the Northeast. There are some outliers there, but definitely a good opportunity to get out and talk to some of these admissions representatives if by chance you can't get to them during the school day here. We also have another sheet out there that shows a schedule, an up-to-date schedule as of about an hour ago of who is scheduled to come here between now and usually December. We've already had a few visits. We had a visit from University of Southern California this morning. We had one from Savannah College of Art and Design. So we're getting regular visits from colleges. Normally they meet in our office, but if it's getting a lot of interest, we'll move it to a classroom. So your students will have access to that. So talking a little bit about college types. So this varies depending on the person. It really varies depending on grade point average and test scores. Now, one thing about the top of the list, we have REACH schools. So REACH schools, we usually say they're schools that accept less than 35% of their applicants. So if you look at Ivy League schools, for example, most of them are 10% or less. Now, keep in mind, those schools have very competitive applicant pools. The person at the bottom of their high school class may not apply to that school. So they're all top students. So I'll have a student, and I say this often, I'll have a student who maybe hypothetically has a 100 GPA and perfect SAT scores. I'll still tell them Harvard's a reach or MIT's a reach because there's more to it than that. They look at the whole package. They look at what you've been involved in, some of the things you've done outside of school. They look at your essay that you're working on English classes laboriously. Those are some things about REACH schools. So I have had students before stack their list with many, many REACH schools and maybe one safety school. And then when all the REACH schools said no, they weren't too happy with the one safety school. Match schools, so what we say for match school is one that If you look at their average grade point average and their average SAT scores, and that's what you have, then it would be a match school. It would be a very high likelihood that they would accept you. So usually, depending on the student, that's a school above a 50% acceptance rate, more or less. Safety schools, again, depending on students' grades and test scores, are schools that you're pretty certain they would say yes to you based on those things. Just a couple of things to point out here. I mentioned this student who applied to 60 colleges. The common application has a quota of 20 colleges. And we have had students exceed that quota before, but it is expensive. So that's why we try to meet with them, students that is, back in the spring, so they can make some informed decisions on their lists. I'm just gonna say a quick word about safety schools, and this is just kind of also to the students up there. I think we get a lot of, shall we say, extra customers in our office in the spring when it's stressful anyway. But I would say if a school is your safety school, that's your business. That doesn't need to be everybody's business. Your safety school could be somebody else's reach school. And sometimes when people say that, they're just like, oh, great, I'm not going to a very good school. So I know no one means anything by that, but it does kind of trickle down. So that's my public service announcement for that one. So there are different admissions types, and it seems like every year I see new ones, like super amazing decision, or, you know, who knows? They're gonna wordsmith in a way to make it look attractive to apply. Early decision, and these get mixed up a lot. Early decision means you are only applying to one school early decision, and you're essentially telling them that if you accept me, I'm going here. Really, regardless of the cost, quite honestly. So you'll see statistics out there that say people who apply early decision have a higher acceptance rate. Well, yes, because they know they have you if you apply early decision. One of the downfalls of that is you won't find out whether you're accepted or not, usually until right before the holiday break, usually late December, January. And by that point, it's kind of late to apply to more schools. So that's where you kind of have to be aware and make sure it's a school you definitely want to go to, and one that you would be willing to pay the cost for if your child should go. Early action. The way I explain this, and the best way to explain this, is they take your application, they put it on the top of the pile. So if you're applying to 20 colleges, you can hypothetically apply to all 20 under early action. There's no penalty for it. It's not binding like early decision is. One of the nice things about that is just what I said. You apply early and you find out early. One of the nice things about programs like our decision days is, as a matter of fact, I think every year when we do it, there's almost a relief I see with the kids. They're like, oh, I've been accepted to a college. That means I have a place to go after this year. So it kind of takes off a little pressure, but it does give you some information very early on. So just off the top of my head, I know I mentioned the University of Maine has an early action deadline of December 1st, or they call it a priority deadline. Maine Maritime has one of November 30th. Now, Maine Maritime, I'm just going to say something real quick about them. Just about 2 or 3 years ago, they started to accept the common application. So that means they're all of a sudden getting a lot more applicants than they used to get, and they're filling up quickly. So it's a good idea to apply early to Maine Maritime. And I have to tell kids this too sometimes. The deadline is not the day they want you to apply. It's the day they want you to apply by. So if you apply 3, 4, 5 weeks ahead of time, that's fine, they'll still read it. So those are just some things there. Regular decision is their regular deadline. So regular decision essentially means they will not accept any applications past that date. That's their deadline. Some schools in the area have what's called rolling admission. So the University of Maine, for example, has an early action deadline, but they also accept applications through the summer. and so does Husson, and so does Eastern Maine Community College. So that's what rolling admission is. There are many schools in the country that have rolling admission. Restrictive early action tends to be like very similar to a early decision, but individual colleges have different policies on what that is. And like I said, I'm seeing new terms for early application deadlines every year. So it's just really, the websites are very informative most times. And of course, meeting with the individual representatives is always helpful. One thing about meeting with the representatives, I've forgotten this, but I thought I should include it. So if you go to the college fair and you meet with a representative from a college there, or you meet with them here, visiting John Bapst, there's a good chance that same person will be reviewing your application. They will be the one reading your file. So it is definitely a good opportunity to put a face with a name. They do remember, and it's amazing how, like, we find this every year. Admissions representatives come back, they remember being here in the past, they remember meeting us, they remember some of the kids we've had apply and that they've met. So they are able to put a face with a name in that regard. So staying focused and on time. We did leave a timeline back there that is available for parents, but also we've included for students information as well. So using the timeline is very helpful. Sometimes I think just the panic that comes from this process, the uncertainty of what do I do, what am I supposed to do? So the timeline is very helpful in that regard. We have listed here some deadlines for us internally in our office for transcript requests. So what we have there, October 15th is it's an unusual early deadline, but it does exist for some. So if you have a college, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I know, for example, October 15th early action deadline, that means we would like transcript requests into us by October 7th. A 5-day period where we can follow up, make sure your teachers have their recommendations done, make sure we have everything we need.
Do you want to just tell the parents a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So the transcript requests, we have them right outside of our office. They are purple, right? Purple sheets.
Not pink, good job.
Not pink, purple. And what they are is we get one for every single time you need a transcript sent somewhere, whether it's a college, whether it's a scholarship. Sometimes we even get them for the good driver discounts for your auto insurance. That's something we often ask for the paper trail so that we have permission to send their record. If your child is 18, they can sign for themselves, but if they're not, you can sign. Or you need to sign, I should say. November 1st is a very common deadline, common early deadline for a lot of schools. What's tricky about that is like a week right before that is when the quarter closes. So we have to usually send grades twice, once before and once after. But again, we ask for that about 5 school days before the actual deadline. I've told this story in a couple of the classes, but if you remember a few years ago, late October, we had these power outages in the area, and it was right at this time, it was right on the heels of this November 1st deadline. So we had a lot of panicked kids during those days because we couldn't send anything, they didn't have school, so that's why the 5-day head start's always useful. So I won't go through all of those, but essentially I will say I have there the dates when we're on holiday vacation in December. So we are not in the office regularly during that time. So that's why we ask if there's a January 1st deadline, which is another common deadline, we get the transcript requests early. All right? Any questions about that or anything I've talked about so far? Okay, moving on applications, and I'll just say one of the things we do in our senior meetings is we actually have them pull up the Common App on our screen. We go through it with them a little bit, make sure they're putting it in correctly. There's usually not a spell check on there, so it's important that things are spelled correctly, punctuation, all of that. Edit carefully, make sure you check your grammar and spelling. I always have an aspiring psychology major every year who misspells it on the application. And sometimes they notice that, not in a good way. Next slide, we talked a little bit about the transcript release, so we don't really have to spend a whole lot of time on that. We just skip that one, I think. Yeah.
So you got the delay on these.
Yeah, I didn't know it was on there.
Woohoo, we made it.
So with the application package, test scores, they want to see your test scores, and as Mrs. Walsh was talking about, they want to see official test scores most of the time. They want it directly from the College Board, or directly from ACT. They want that official information just so they can verify how well you did on your exams. A lot of times, and this is something that happens quite regularly actually, students may not remember their password, happens to all of us, but what ends up happening sometimes is we get students with duplicate accounts for College Board. They won't remember their passwords, they're just like, oh, I'll just create another one. Or sometimes parents will be intending to be helpful and they'll create another one to sign up for an upcoming SAT. What that does, unfortunately, is it sends the test scores to different accounts. So we'll often only figure that out after the fact. So it's a good idea to have that one account. And if you want to be sure whether you have one or not, you can always call their customer service number, which we have, and which you can also look up on their website as well. So that's regarding the test scores. So your essay, your essay for your applications tend to be very standard. As a matter of fact, all senior English classes had that for an assignment over the summer to work on. Was it 2 essays you guys had to do? Yeah? Oh, you only did 1? Oh, they're not. Okay. Okay. Good. All right, so one of the good things about that is you get some feedback on both of them and you can choose your strongest essay. But your essay is really your chance to show them why you're different than anybody else, because until that point, you're another application file they have to read. So take that opportunity to show how you're different. So we did talk a little bit about that, and I'm always grateful for our English department helping our seniors with that. But there is a way to put it on the Common App. Last I knew, you had to kind of copy and paste it. I don't believe there's a way to upload it yet, but there are other applications where you can do that. Certainly, we're happy to look over essays as well, give our feedback. Certainly, they can ask you if you're comfortable doing that as well. But the essay really is a critical part of the application. Again, it is your chance to show your individuality. So the next part, resume. So this doesn't go on the application. In fact, in the past, our English department has had people do resumes. Now we're having students do activity lists, which are a little bit easier to work with. So we get those activity lists and we actually use those as we write our recommendation letters. We feel like we've gotten to know your children pretty well over the last few years, but there's some activities we may not know they do in and out of school. So these lists come in pretty useful. I'd say one of the main differences between our recommendation letters and I'm going into the next slide, I guess, a little bit. Our recommendation letters and teacher recommendation letters. So our recommendation letters tend to be more summative in terms of what they've done in 4 years, what their grade point average is, what type of classes they've taken. Teacher recommendations tend to focus on the teacher's experience with them in the classroom and some of the things they've noticed. And also, we do tell teachers, if you can't properly advocate for students in this process, politely tell them that they may want to find someone else to write your letter. Teachers here are not in the business of making it difficult for a student, so we will make sure that whatever recommendations we get are those that advocate for them in this process. But we do one for every single one of our students. So I'm going to do one for all of my seniors individually. Mrs. Walsh is going to do one for all of her seniors individually. So we're going to be doing a lot of writing in the next month. But that's okay because we actually enjoy the process. It tends to be very positive, and we learn a lot about the kids too in this process. So we put our recommendation letters, and teachers put their recommendations into the Naviance program, and we also connect Naviance to their common application. So through Naviance, we can complete a lot of the forms that the common application has, and then once that's all done, and they bring us the transcript release form, we can send the transcript, the recommendation letter from the counselor, recommendation letters from the teacher, all to the colleges electronically. So it's pretty useful in that way, and actually it's been good as far as giving us valuable data over the last 7 years. So that's one thing there. The school report form, that's another form that will show up on the Common App, but it's also something we complete in Naviance. It asks questions like, what is the student's grade point average? So the grade point average is on a 100-point scale. A lot of times in our junior meetings, we'll tell them what their 4.0 scale translation is, but that's just so they know for the sake of scholarships. We just use the 100-point scale on our transcript. They also ask us class rank, which as a school we don't do class rank, which I think has really been in our students' favor over the years, because we have some very talented students who are in the lower half of their class. That's just the type of environment we have here. So that's a good thing. So that's the school report form. Teacher recommendations. We've talked to students about this as early as last spring. We have forms in our office that they can come get and bring them to teachers, and we encourage them to take the time to ask them in person if they'd write a letter. I think we've had a few nervous kids over the years who just kind of drop it on a teacher's desk and run.
Don't do that.
Yeah, please don't do that. But please take the time to ask them in person, and once they give them the green sheet, which many of them have as early as last spring, that gives the teachers a reminder that they have a letter to write. They also have a teacher recommendation form that they complete in Naviance that connects to the common application. So one thing about that is with that, there used to be a thing where we'd have teachers rank students, like how do they rank as far as academic ability, and it's like good, very good, best in my career. Well, one thing we found is if best in my career is from a teacher with 5 years experience versus a teacher with 35 years of experience, it's kind of a subjective statement. So we've just kind of told teachers, stop doing that. It's optional, so you don't have to do the ratings anymore. Let's let your letter of recommendation really speak to that student. So that's gone, but they still have to do the form and talk a little bit about where they've had them in class, what subject. So that's the teacher recommendation form. There is, as I said before, we strongly encourage teachers to be honest with students if they don't feel like they can properly advocate for them in this process, to say politely, maybe ask somebody else. But there is something on the Common Application that's a FERPA waiver. So FERPA, just so you know what that is. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, which means you by law can review your student's file at any time. So what colleges want is they want you to waive that right as it pertains to recommendation letters. Because colleges want to know that they're getting a candid assessment of your son or daughter. And a lot of times what that is some teachers will not write a letter if they've not checked it, but we encourage students that best practices to waive their right, but ultimately it is their decision. So we do read the letters, we make sure that they properly advocate for them. And I would like to think that hopefully after a few years being in the building, if you pick 2 or 3 out of the whole lot of teachers we have, they would strongly advocate for you in that process. So that's really what that is. So under non-teacher references, sometimes we get the question of, my uncle knows Michael Jordan. He said he'd write a letter of recommendation for me. You guys know who Michael Jordan is, right? Okay, just making sure. All right. So things like that, or they might say, my coach offered to write a letter for me, or my boss this summer that I worked for, my pastor, my priest, my rabbi, whatever religious leader you have. And that's fine. You can do that. You can have what's called a non-teacher reference, or what's also called a supplemental reference, but it's not in lieu of a teacher reference. It would be in addition to. So it's usually somebody who doesn't work in the building. So if that's the case, you can send them a link through the Common Application where they can upload their letter of recommendation right to the Common App, so we don't have to deal with sending letters and paper back and forth. You can do that as well, and we'll, if that's the case with any students, we'll talk about that in the conference. Sometimes what I would say too, portfolio, if you are looking to major in something in the arts, whether it's performing arts, visual arts, sometimes they'll want a portfolio, sometimes they'll want an audition, which portfolio has become a little bit easier with technology. It used to be a big bulky thing that was many pages and weighed about 50 pounds. Now you can do it electronically and send it that way. So for students here who are taking advanced art, AP Studio Art, a lot of times that's part of the curriculum anyway, and they get a lot of help in compiling a portfolio. But once in a while we'll have students who want to go to school for theater or dance or music even, and for that they have to do an audition. And I've had students who have auditioned at 5 or 6 colleges, and if you look at a map, it almost looks like they cover every corner of the U.S. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge because there are a lot of places to apply to and to travel to, but there is some support with that as well. And just be wary of the deadlines and the work that is involved in compiling that information if it's a portfolio. Finally, staying calm. Really, the name of the game here is know when things are due and plan ahead. If you can do those things, this will be a pain-free, stress-free process. Well, I can't say stress-free, less stress process. And really having that timeline, using that timeline to go by is key. And it's actually interesting every year because up until maybe the holiday break, students have been doing all their work, getting their essays done, getting their applications done, taking the SAT 2-3 times. They submit their applications and then they come to us and they're in task mode at that point. And they're like, okay, what do we do next? You wait. And they're like, what? So there's a very noticeable stoppage right there. And sometimes that part is stressful. Sometimes the unknowing is a little difficult, but ultimately we feel like it's important that we give them the support they need to get their applications in as early as possible to maximize hopefully their benefit for scholarships and any opportunities like that. But also, we want them to enjoy this year and not agonize over next year. So those were just some basics there. At this point, I think we've covered just about everything in the handout. We'll open it up to questions if anybody has any questions over anything that we've discussed. Any questions for the benefit of the group? Yeah.
So in the Common App, there's a question about like a gap year.
Yes.
So, like, what, I mean, you were considering a gap year, but the way it's presented is like you're taking a gap year.
Yeah.
So, you just have to decide?
I think I know where that question is. I'm just trying to remember how it's worded. But usually, if at this point in the year, if most students are considering that, they're not 100% on it yet. So what we usually do is we encourage them to apply as if they're not taking one, where they have our help and resources at their disposal. But if they ultimately get accepted and they decide to take a gap year, maybe later in the year, there's probably the better option is to contact the school that you hope to attend, and you can defer your admission for a semester or a year. That seems to be the best way in terms of less panic after graduation. And that is becoming more common, even with students we've had in recent years going to very selective schools. Gap years have become a common thing. Any other questions? Okay, well, we have plenty of materials in the back. Please take whatever you need. We'll be around. Thank you, everybody, for coming.